Well, hello, everybody. We are excited today to share with you some people who are close to our hearts, some connected people who are connected with Praise. For those of you who've been a part of Praise, you will recognize and know them. And so, but we wanted to have an opportunity to give them an opportunity. We wanted to give them an opportunity to share a little bit about what God's been doing in their lives, where God's leading them, and where they see the Lord leading them in ministry, and then give you a chance to connect with them as well. And so without any further ado, let me introduce to you the Chapmans. Would you just say hello?
Hi guys. So nice to see you all.
So you might not recognize them, but Jessica grew up at Praise and was a part of the children's ministry, youth ministry through the years, and we have obviously a deep heart for a while back, went into ministry, and I'm going to let them share a little bit about how they got connected with Timothy as well. And so I'm just going to hand it off to them and give them an opportunity to just share a little bit of their background in ministry, how they got connected, and then, you know, what the Lord had called them to. So do you mind, guys, just sharing a little bit about what your history looks like?
Yeah. Totally. So, of course, like you said, I grew up in Praise. My parents started attending in 1988 when I was 5. So I've known Liz since she was knee-high to a grasshopper, basically. And I, of course, under Pastor Burris's ministry, so many missionaries were invited into our church, and then my parents invited missionaries into our home. And so through that was kind of the first sparks of being interested in missions. And through that also just getting this real passion for, I think this could be something that the Lord has called me to. And so after high school, I ended up studying to be a nurse. That was kind of I had not really anticipated or expected that would be something that I would do. But I became a nurse, but still had this desire to really be involved in missions and ministry. And I would just cry out to God, like, I feel like you've put this in my heart, but yet how does this fit? Because I also have this desire for evangelism. And so during that time, while I was working at Mercy Hospital as a pediatric ICU nurse, I started traveling with healthcare ministries, which was the AG's medical mission short-term teams. And I also, during that time, started working with them doing community health teaching. At the same time, I took a course about community health evangelism. And all of a sudden, it was like I began to see, like the Lord could use what he's invested in my life as a way to share the gospel, which was really my heart. So it was this kind of aha moment. And shortly after that, there was an opportunity for me to serve in Cameroon, in Central Africa, with the Assemblies of God for 2 years as a missionary associate. And the invitation was to work with the national church there to introduce to them the idea of community health evangelism projects in their local churches. And so I went, 30-year-old single girl, shooting myself in the foot that I'd ever find a guy who also wanted to be a missionary, right? And showed up on the field. I loved my time there. It was transformative in my life, and really neat opportunities to work with Cameroonians and help them understand this new way of being able to present the gospel using needs that were in their community, and helping local churches reach out in a very practical way. And I'd been there about a year, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, Jessica, do you want to come over for dinner?" And I said, "Sure, I'll come over for dinner." And she said, "Well, hooray, because there's going to be a young man named Timothy Chapman who's going to be at my house next week." And I'd heard of him. His fame went before him. He was living actually in the neighboring country, working for 2 years as an agricultural missionary. And he didn't know it was a setup. So maybe you can give some of your background, how you got to Mary's house that night.
Yeah. Well, I grew up as a missionary kid in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right smack in the middle of Africa. And I gave my heart to Jesus when I was about 7, and grew up in the church, grew up with amazing parents, grew up involved in ministry and really loved it, but never wanted to be a missionary by profession. That was what my dad did. That's what my mom did. I just wanted to do something else. And so when I came back to the US for college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and started kind of taking different classes, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And God ended up taking me on this journey to discovering agriculture, which was also something that I never wanted to do. I wanted to stay away, as far away from agriculture as possible. And at the end of my college career, I had a degree in agriculture and community development. And through the process of getting that degree, agriculture became a passion of mine. And as I learned about agriculture, I realized that because of my history growing up and understanding agriculturalists in Central Africa, there is no way to separate the physical and the spiritual world. And so if I wanted to go back and help Africans learn how to farm better, I needed to do it as a missionary, because I needed to be able to share the gospel and bring in the spiritual as I taught agriculture. And so I ended up doing some pretty neat internships here in the United States, and then went to Central African Republic for 2 years as a missionary, working with a missionary there who was teaching people about agriculture and weaving the gospel, the message of the gospel, into agriculture. And I loved it. It was an amazing experience. I felt like this is what God has been preparing for me to do. And I was really hoping that it would transfer into a 2-year assignment to long-term. But because of the violence in the country, I was not able to stay, and I had to leave the country after 2 years and come back to the United States. And I had to leave the country by going out through the neighboring country, Cameroon, which is where I met Jessica.
So that began our relationship. And through that, then he did come back to the States, did start living and working here, and we did long distance while I was finishing up my, the last, I guess it was by that time, 9 or 10 months of my assignment. And when we got back and got married, we really had this sense that God was still going to use us in missions. We had a heart for French-speaking Africa, and we really had a heart for using what God had invested in our lives. It was very clear to us that God had made specific investments of training and giftings and passions that we felt like he was going to use for some purpose together now as a couple. And so several years ago, we started looking into what is that going to look like for our family, and what is God going to invite us into in that.
Yeah. So you were married here in Springfield by Brother Corbin, Don
Yes.
Corbin, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So you have some connections there with real people who have been a part of ministry to the French African just world for years and years. Do you mind me kind of walking or asking you a little bit about their influence in all of this? How were they a part of that?
Yeah, so there's always been a joke between Don Corbin and myself that he was going to pick my husband for me. But since I didn't let him pick my husband, I had to let him marry us. So he and Virginia, and truly so many other of the missionary couples at Praise, I don't want to get into naming names because there's too many of them, all these amazing retired couples. But definitely the Corbins, as having ministered so faithfully and well in West Africa, Central Africa, they really were inspirational to me as a single person, and then also to us as just the kind of couple that we want to be. That kind of passion for the Lord and faithfulness, and the respect and honor that they give to our African brothers and sisters is so incredible. So they would definitely be heroes of the faith in our book.
Very cool. So when you all came back, obviously your family has grown, but you all have been, did you mention you've been in California? Is that right?
Yeah. So we've been here since 2015. We got married in 2016, and I've been working as a pediatric nurse again here in Sacramento. And then Timothy has been working partially for in a refugee resettlement group, managing a refugee farm for about the first 3 years we were here. And now he works for the University of California at Davis in their honeybee research lab, which is also something he has experience with. So yes, we've been living and working here in Sacramento, attending a great church here, been involved as the missions directors at our church, and have really been thriving, but also feeling this sense of unsettledness, because we knew that the Lord had something more to come.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that, if you don't mind, as we're kind of looking at what's up next. You've mentioned, or I've heard, Guinea is where what the Lord has put on your heart. Can you kind of walk us through that whole process and kind of where you stand in relation to that?
Yeah. Well, we wanted to get married and start a family first here in the United States before we went overseas. And so we were married for a year, had Elliot, and then when Elliot was about 3 months old, we started seriously looking into mission organizations that we wanted to go with. And we knew that God had given us specific gifts and talents, and we wanted to find an organization that we believed their doctrine, but also we agreed with their missions philosophy, how they do missions. And so we started looking around, and there are some really great missions out there that are doing great work, but they really didn't fit us. And so we stumbled across Christian and Missionary Alliance, and they have a branch of their missions, their world missions, called CAMA, Compassion and Mercy Associates. And they focus specifically on relief and development work, which is kind of what our training has been in and where our passions lie.
And it was unique in the missions world because we wanted that sense of you can focus on relief and development, but you can also not neglect the gospel. You're still keeping gospel central focused. Mm-hmm. And that was a really important piece of things, that both of those would be present.
Mm-hmm. And they work all over the world. The CAMA Services has been around since the end of the Vietnam War. They have a very long track record of just doing a holistic development, which we found very appealing. They work in a lot of African nations. And so we went to them and we said, this is what we have to offer. We don't feel like we're being called to any one particular country. We love the French-speaking African countries that we've been to, but we don't really feel a particular calling to one spot. Here's what we have to offer. Where could you use us?
Yeah, so they started telling us about Guinea, which is in West Africa, just kind of south of, I know lots of people at Praise know Scott and Lavana Ennis. And so Scott and Lavana are in the Gambia. So it's just south of the Gambia. So south of Senegal, south of the Gambia. And we were like, okay, West Africa. Like, we've never really considered West Africa. Our backgrounds were in Central Africa. And so there was a cool project going on there that a rural Guinean pastor was requesting assistance from a missionary for something that they were calling the Guinea Agro-Pastoral Project. And basically, the project was such that this, well, maybe you can tell the story of his history and kind of the end of in the Ebola crisis.
Yeah. Pastor Jeremy is a Guinean pastor, and his heart is for evangelism and reaching the people of his country. And when Ebola hit there in 2014, it was really devastating. It killed a lot of people in the entire country, but in his community. And there were organizations that were coming in, they were treating Ebola, but as soon as people got better or they died from it, the organizations would leave, and they would leave this hurt. People were hurting emotionally, they were hurting spiritually, and they were just letting people mourn. They weren't addressing the needs. And so Pastor Jeremy, he just started going into these communities, and he would offer his condolences to the people who had lost family members, and he would mourn with them. And people were like, thank you for coming in and mourning with us when no one else did. Even our imams, our Muslim leaders, they're not really addressing what's going on. Thank you for just coming in and supporting us. And what he saw was people outside of the capital really support themselves on agriculture. They're subsistence farmers, and they live off of what they can grow. And when you have all these single parent households trying to support their families off of agriculture, it's really hard. And so he doesn't know that much about agriculture, but he has a 3G network on his phone, and he started to kind of research.
He'd like go on and watch YouTube videos in French, like on 3G, to learn what he could.
And so he learned some basics, and he started to teach people, and people began to see improvements in their fields. And he saw that as an opportunity. When he helped them, he could take that opportunity to go back a couple of months later and check up on their fields, but at the same time be able to continue to share the message of the gospel. And so he saw agriculture as a way to connect with his neighbors who were non-Jesus followers. And because of the help that he had given these villages in just going and talking with them and being with them, a village gave him 40 acres of land and said, wow, do with it what you want. And so he had this vision, let's build a farm. Let's build a place where we can do demonstrations, where we can invite people to learn about agriculture. And it can be a place where we can teach the gospel, we can share the gospel, we can talk about parables that talk about agriculture and seeds, at the same time as training people on how to do better forms of agriculture, or teach, bring in different types of agriculture for people. But he's a pastor, he doesn't know anything about agriculture, just the basics. And so he requested from Comma Services that Comma send out a missionary to support him in this project. And so we went out there, we visited him. We had about 80 farmers that came to hear me speak about soil conservation that were in his network that he invited. A lot of enthusiasm, and they're willing to sit and listen to messages about the gospel weaved into these different agricultural principles that him and I were both talking about. And so there's a tremendous hunger, there's a real need that he cannot fill himself. He needs the technical assistance.
Right.
But once he has that, he has a huge network of people.
Yeah. We're really excited about this because it is national driven. So God has given this vision to Pastor Jeremy, and we can come in and be a support to that vision. But then when we leave, we aren't the ones who God gave the vision to originally. We are the ones who can come in and assist with that. And so really the heart is that we would come in, as Timothy will be assisting him with that. And then the National Church in Guinea, the Evangelical National Church there, has a heart to also have a couple of other agricultural initiatives as a way to reach out to this largely subsistence farmer population of the country. And so they have a heart to have Timothy also do some education at the Bible school for the pastors who have to be agriculturalists to support their ministry and their families. And then there's another site where they also want to do another demonstration farm as well. So us just getting to come in. When we were there, we really saw, as we were driving through, just the lack of gospel access as a whole throughout the country. It's about 85% Muslim, and less than 1% of people are classified as evangelical Christians. So people who could like really share, who is Jesus? What has he done for me? And so just wanting to strengthen that national church, also ourselves being more Jesus followers placed in that country, more touch points, more access to the gospel. And so when we saw this need, we were like, wow, like the needs of what God has poured into our life, the need that is there is so ripe and able to be filled by the things that God has already invested and put into our lives. And so I think when we came back, we both sensed this invitation from the Lord to say, he's already at work.
Yeah.
And he was inviting us to say, would you like to come and join me with what I am already doing, with what I've invested in you? Are you willing to take this step of faith, move your family from a fairly comfortable life and go to this place where I am at work and I am doing something new and I'm inviting you to partner with me? And so we said, yes, we'll do it.
Well, and this type of an opportunity. It seems like even many times, at least in the assemblies, when there's a missionary who's going out on the field for the first time, at first term in a new location, there's a whole lot of developing of new relationships. That's not maybe the best way to say it. There are even trying to find where they might be the right fit. It seems like this is totally different, where there is something that's moving and you all are the perfect fit to go, and you know exactly what you're going to do first day as you get boots on the ground type of a situation. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. I think we came to Comma Services and we offered what we had, and they were able to, and they had a place that could use those specific skills. That being said, you can go to a new place and think you're going to do one thing, and especially in Africa, you end up wearing many hats and maybe not even doing what you thought you were going to do. And so I think there are a lot of needs that we can help address, but there are also a lot of needs that will arise that maybe we didn't see, but now are very pressing.
We actually anticipate that for my side of ministry, because I said, okay, I've lived in an underdeveloped African nation before, and I realized the just daily life things of how difficult it can be. And so I just want to be, the first couple of years, we're going to be learning a second language. We learn French first in French language school. And then when we arrive, we'll be learning a second tribal language as well. And so that's going to be my huge role at the beginning. But then the needs of women and children in that community are so huge. And that's always the way the Lord seems to work again and again in my life. And so I think that's been an exciting part of things for me, is realizing when I get there, there's no script for my ministry. But looking back to the way the Lord has always worked in my life, that is going to quickly come, and it's going to come in probably an unexpected way. But I have every anticipation that it's going to be with women and it's going to be with children, and probably will contain some element of literacy as well. So just, I think that having ideas of what you're going to do in ministry, but having a very open hand and saying, Lord, we're just your servants. We're coming to do what you want us to do.
Right. So I'm not as familiar with CMA and the pattern that they use for itineration. What does that look like? I have more experience with that in the assemblies. Do you go and meet with people and kind of share and then ask for support? What does that look like?
Well, in COVID.
Yeah, it's definitely been challenging. We were appointed 2 weeks before COVID really hit. So all the churches here closed down, and we've
never reopened.
They've never reopened. So we've been reaching out to people by Zoom, and asking for support that way.
The way that Common Services particularly does things is that we are required to raise a certain portion of our support. So their national office here in the United States raises a portion of our monthly support, and then we're required to raise another portion of our monthly support. So from that we can speak to churches Christian Missionary Alliance churches. We can speak to other churches from other denominations. And then a lot of what we've been doing is meeting with individuals over Zoom, and then also making videos for churches, doing services in this very virtual sort of way. It is largely similar to the Assemblies of God and how their missionaries raise support, and that there are typically people supporting monthly to keep those missionaries on the field and keep them in proximity to the people that they're ministering to. And so that holds true for us as well. We just have a little less to raise because our national office will help us with some of that.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So then where are you guys at in that process? Where, as you're raising your support, where are you right in that process?
Yeah. So we're at, I think now it's 51.7% of our monthly support that's needed. And so we're about halfway through that support raising process. And so, yeah, we just have been delighted in the midst of COVID that the Lord has provided. It's actually kind of a fast amount of time to only have been approved by the board of directors for 6 months, and to be at 50% is actually fairly miraculous in a normal economic situation. And so I think that's encouraged our hearts that, like, wow, this is like God's work. Like, he's moving this forward.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with that. Our hope is that we will be able to leave for the field next summer. We're having one more little boy soon to arrive in 8 weeks. Hopefully not 10, 8 weeks in the name of Jesus.
Speak it.
Yes. And then we will be finishing up meeting with potential partners and churches and just building that support team that we really feel like we need in more ways than just finances.
Right. Okay. And then in that, if there was a way that somebody wanted to, maybe at Praise or anybody who would see this wanted to connect with you all and follow along in your journey or find ways that they might be able to support you, how would they connect?
Yeah, probably one of the best ways is going to be through our private Facebook group, which you can request to join. And you would just search for the Chapman family, African Wanderings. And we update that on a fairly regular basis, at least once a week. That's updated. And then our Instagram is @wandering_chaps. So you can follow us there. That form of social media hasn't taken off as fast because we are waiting for when we're overseas. That's where we're going to really use that one for pictures of daily life kind of stuff. So that one will be a fun one to follow once we leave. And then obviously just reaching out to us by our phone numbers, email addresses, or through the Comma Services website, which is commaservices.org.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Would you, as we're kind of wrapping it up, is there anything you would just leave people with as you guys think about the ministry and where you see God leading, or even with a word of encouragement? Is there anything that you would say just to kind of close this time together?
Yeah, I think there would be one thing I would say. I was thinking when we were preparing to talk to you about, I guess it was 2 years ago, Elliot was small. We had flown back to Missouri for Christmas, and so it was Christmas 2018. And we were really in the midst of this praying, seeking, where do you want us to be, Lord? And we actually, after a service that was really impactful at Praise, had gone forward and you had prayed for us, Pastor Allen, and the verse that you spoke over us has not left me through our whole process. And that was, let him who walks in darkness and has no light trust in the name of his God. And that has come back to me again and again as various parts of our journey have felt like we've been walking in darkness, and truly just that sense of like, we don't really know what's going to come next. Or is this really what you're inviting us into, God? Is this really the choice we're supposed to make? And so as we walked through each point, that verse would come back to me again, let him who walks in darkness and has no light. And just turning our eyes again to Jesus. And just, I think through our journeys, that has been something that has come up again and again, is that the Lord is leading and directing each step that we take. And I think that is such even this year for so many people, is such an important thing to remember, that the Lord is directing our steps even when we're walking in darkness.
Amen. Amen. I remember that. That was I also was thinking about that in preparation for this Zoom call today, and sharing with the congregation. And so I do encourage any who might have opportunity or the ability to participate financially or through prayer, that the Chapmans are good soil to sow seed into. And they are the type of people who will participate in the harvest too. So I encourage you, if you have the ability to join with them in this process, to connect with them, and maybe even if you can't, to be one of those who would come alongside and pray over them, pray for protection, pray for covering for them and for their family, and then for just the Lord to continue to very clearly lead them. It seems as if he has provided maybe just one step at a time, but he seems to be providing each step of the way that kind of leadership for them. So Chapmans, thank you so much for taking the time today. It was good to see you guys. Congratulations. 8 weeks from now. Congratulations again. 8 weeks. And in the meantime, be safe, and thank you again for taking the time today, and just pray the Lord blesses you and your ministry.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.